Hello, I'm a man of Earth. I'm making this video because, first, content creation is something I've always intended to do, but never quite had the time, inclination, or inspiration to get around to. Second, I've recently come to realize the importance of recording and documenting certain universal aspects of human nature and interaction in order for any interested parties to, hopefully, get a better understanding of the human condition, particularly as it relates to men and the unique challenges we face in modern society. If there's even something minor I can do to help another man in understanding the world as it is, rather than how he wishes it to be, as well as his place in it, then I feel that that's worth a shot. And no, this isn't going to be some new age frou-frou self-help channel. All I intend to present is evidence, some anecdotal, others more concrete. I'm going to endeavor to always leave it up to you, the listener, to make up his own damn mind. Let's begin. The first article I wanted to bring to your attention will be the first in a series I'm creating called The Real Patriarchy. The reason for this naming convention will become evident as we proceed. The article in question is a New York Times piece from August 2015 by a Rukmini Kalimachi entitled ISIS Enshrines a Theology of Rape, which details the various crimes and indignities inflicted upon the Yazidi people of northern Iraq. The link to the article will be in the description box below, and I strongly urge you to go and read it for yourself. Despite the casual, out-the-hand, gynocentric dismissal of the male victims of this ethnic targeting, it really is a riveting and unbiased accounting of some pretty horrific events. That being said, there are 3 parts of this article in particular I would like to draw your attention to. The first, under the section entitled Calculated Conquest, the author writes, and I quote, "Survivors say that men and women were separated within the first hour of their capture. Adolescent boys were told to lift up their shirts, and if they had armpit hair, they were directed to join their older brothers and fathers. In village after village, the men and older boys were driven or marched to nearby fields, where they were forced to lie down in the dirt and sprayed with automatic fire." End quote. Now the second part that I would like to share reads accordingly. On August 15th, 2014, the Islamic State ordered the residents to report to a school in the center of town. When she got there, 40-year-old Aishan Ali Saleh found a community elder negotiating with the Islamic State, asking if they could be allowed to hand over their money and gold in return for safe passage. The fighters initially agreed and laid out a blanket where Ms. Saleh placed her heart-shaped pendant and her gold rings, while the men left crumpled bills. Instead of letting them go, the fighters began shoving the men outside, bound for death. Sometime later, a fleet of cars arrived, and the women, girls, and children were driven away. End quote. Pretty terrible, I know. Just please keep in mind these 2 parts as we proceed. I really want this to sink in. Try to imagine if you can stomach it. Men and pubescent boys, some not even old enough to begin consider shaving, being ripped from their families, marched out into a field, told to lie face down in the dirt, and then summarily murdered. Now, I'm not trying to be ghoulish or morbid. I just want you to allow that image to detonate in your psyche before we continue, because that will be the last time that the fate of these males will be mentioned in this over 3,300 word article. Now, onto the third part of this article that caught my attention and motivated me to make this video in the first place. Under the section entitled Property of ISIS, I quote, "The use of sex slavery by the Islamic State initially surprised even the group's most ardent supporters, many of whom sparred with journalists online after the first reports of systematic rape. The Islamic State's leadership has repeatedly sought to justify the practice to its internal audience. After the initial article in Dabiq in October 2014, the issue came up in the publication again this year, that'll be 2015, in an editorial in May that expressed the writer's hurt and dismay at the fact that some of the group's own sympathizers had questioned the institution of sex slavery. What really alarmed me was that some of the Islamic State supporters started denying the matter, as if the soldiers of the Caliphate had committed a mistake or evil, the author wrote. "I write this while the letters drip of pride," he said. "We have indeed raided and captured the Kafira women and drove them like sheep by the edge of the sword. kafir refers to infidels, end quote. And there you have it. This is the part of the article that really stood out to me. So, even amongst members of one of the most universally reviled Dark Age death cults that the world has ever seen, while the wholesale torture and slaughter of men and boys is celebrated, ignored, and encouraged, the raping, brutalization, and enslavement of women and girls is considered an abomination. Quote, a mistake or evil. Just stop and consider this for a moment. The leaders of these monsters have actually had to, on several occasions, justify to their own followers the mistreatment of conquered females. Careful, ISIS. Your gynocentrism is showing. Now, if you're a man listening to this, I want you to ask yourself 2 questions. 1. Why is it that the well-being and care of women and girls in Yazidi societies rates higher and is of more consideration than the lives of men and boys to ISIS? And 2, why is it that the well-being and care of women and girls in Yazidi societies rates higher and is of more consideration than the lives of men and boys to the New York Times? Here's a hint. It ain't feminism. Thank you very much for listening, and stay tuned for the next video. I'm out.